What you just heard was a recording of me about 2 years ago playing the opening clarinet solo to George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. This is a very popular clarinet solo, probably the most recognizable, or one of the most, and is asked on some auditions, but ultimately is just a fun excerpt to play. And a lot of people, especially students, will be asking about how do we even play that opening gliss? We have a very chromatic instrument. It's not a trombone, not a human voice, not like a violin. How do we possibly get the notes in between? So today I'm going to talk about 1, how to play the gliss, and 2, why it's important that we learn how to play it. First off, let me make it clear. The gliss is not an easy thing to learn, and it might take you multiple years to learn it. I started learning the gliss probably around 9th grade, and I actually got to perform the solo in 10th grade, but we'll listen to that in a little bit. And the performance you just heard was from my junior year of college. And it wasn't until my sophomore year of college where I was actually in a practice room and I could play the gliss about every other time, actually getting something that closely resembled what it should sound like. So that's about 5 years before I actually started to be comfortable to play that solo. Now, of course, I just mentioned I've played this solo 2 times now. And the first time I played this solo was in 10th grade. So let's listen to that clip right now. As you can tell, it's not the full gliss. Typically, you'll start actually sliding your fingers on a D, and you'll go all the way up from the D up to a high C. But in this recording, I started from a G to a C. Why did I do that? Because it's easier. It was a lot easier to do it that way. And so, listen to this recording of me from 10th grade. We can actually get some hints about how to best go about playing this gliss. 1, as I just mentioned, I started up higher because it's easier to gliss a smaller amount, just a 4th, as opposed to a larger amount, a 7th. But also in slow motion, if you go back and listen to it, you'll find you play the whole scale upward, and whenever I got up to the G, the pitch actually goes to the G, scoops down a little bit, and then starts going up again. That's the big hint for how we play this gliss. The first step that you might see on other videos is that whenever you play the gliss, you're sliding your fingers off. And you might see the clarinets where they're actually just sliding their finger off, and that's all you can see. As opposed to, of course, just taking your finger off them. But really what you're starting to do is that when you play the scale upward, and once you get to the D, you actually want your embouchure to be pretty low, making the note rather flat, because that way you have room to both, as you're picking your fingers up and sliding your fingers off, you're also, with your oral cavity, helping the note to go upward as well. Think of it the same way as if you were tuning a note to make it higher or lower. So the biggest way to test this is on our high C. You play a high C, and then on the high C, see how much you can, just with your lip, change how high or low the pitch is. You should have a decent amount of flexibility up there, which is more flexibility than you have in the lower notes. And in this case, that's actually to our advantage, because you'll notice whenever I was playing a D and trying to change the embouchure, change the lip, the note didn't actually change all that much compared to the high C. That means that when we're playing our scale upward, once we get to that D, if we have our lip pretty low and everything voiced pretty low, it's not going to be overly noticeable, or at least as noticeable as on a high note. Next, you'll want to practice this by starting just from a B and going up to a C, where you'll play the B with the lowest lip that you can have, and then as you slide up to the C, you're going to raise your lip as well. Once you've done that, go ahead and start an A and do the same. And notice you'll want to make sure that the middle finger is actually moving before the first finger does. Once you've gotten that down, start on a G. And doing it through a G should be relatively easier. Once we have the right hand, now we're incorporating a different hand, in which case the big thing to remember is that you're not just taking all the fingers off at the same time, but also it's not that you're going to take off your entire right hand and then the left hand. Rather, you'll start with the right hand with the ring finger first, and then as you're the pointer finger in your right hand starting to move away, the ring finger on your left hand can go ahead and start moving as well. And remember, whenever you're on these notes, still start with a lower embouchure, even though it won't sound as noticeable. And of course, another piece of advice, try to use a reed that is overall lighter. If you're going to an audition, you might not be able to have a reed just for Rhapsody in Blue because you'll want a more resistant reed for some other excerpts. But if you're going to perform this, try to find a good reed that's also a lighter reed. So why even learn the Gliss of Rhapsody in Blue? After all, it's one piece out there, and you're not really guaranteed to get to perform it, and it's also not an audition excerpt asked very often. Well, ultimately, it's not the only piece that requires a gliss like this. If you ever learn the Copland Concerto, that actually glisses from a D to a D. If you ever play Maslanka, Give Us This Day, the first clarinet part in the second movement will actually gliss from an F to an F. Now, you could do some fingerings there, but ultimately, if you're able to gliss it mostly with your lips, it's a really cool effect. Really, if you're able to learn this gliss also, anytime you have a smaller gliss asked, especially in newer music, it'll be a lot easier to do these things. Because after all, if you can figure it out from a seventh, you can do it from a third or a second. I once had a piece that asked me to gliss in the lower register, which is a lot harder because there's a lot more resistance in the clarinet down there. But with the same technique as the higher register, I was able to get a similar effect for what they wanted. And of course, it's just popular in a lot of jazz music as well as other genres that you would now be able to play if you can do these gliss things. And really, it's just a fun thing to know how to play. As my last piece of advice, don't forget the scale at the beginning of the piece. The trill and the scale are both very important things to start the piece. You start the whole piece with the low trill on your low G. And it's important that that scale is even. It's also important that that trill is exciting. Whenever I was getting ready to play this for the second time, I went to my teacher asking about it, and he told me that whenever I play that first note, just wait. The audience knows what's happening. A lot of them will know what's happening, and if not, then they're going to be surprised, and it's great. Don't rush to the gliss because that's what you're thinking of. Just have fun with it. Gershwin writes a number of solos afterwards. Hey, editing Trey here. I had filmed an outro, but didn't really like how it sounded or looked. So, thank you for watching. Please let me know if there's any videos that you would like to see about with clarinet or woodwinds or music in general, and keep practicing.